Hello and welcome to How the Light Gets In. I'm Jesse Norman, and it's my huge honor and pleasure to be talking now to Esther Duflo, whom many of you will know as a great economist, a great champion of the relief of poverty around the world, and a co-winner of the Nobel Prize in 2019. So on behalf of the festival and on behalf of all of our viewers, Esther, thank you so much for joining me, and what a pleasure it is to be able to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to this.
So Esther, you'll appreciate that I'm going to be talking not as someone involved in current politics, but as someone with a background and an interest in political economy and specifically in the work that you do. And one of the things that I think is so striking is the extent to which your work is an attempt to think in ways about economics that perhaps aren't captured in the traditional micro-macro debates, and specifically in your pioneering use of randomized control trials. And I just wonder if we could start with that, just to bring the audience into your work a little bit, and you could tell us a little bit about how these trials work, give some examples of, as it were, great results, where things haven't gone so well, and the like.
Yes, I'll be delighted to. So a lot of our work is trying to start by unpacking the problem of poverty, as it were, which is, you could start by trying to ask a very broad question, which is, does growth help alleviate poverty, or whether foreign aid works or it hurts, or somewhere in between. And what you realize when you ask this type of questions, that they are very difficult to answer, because, how would you know? Every country has a different experience, and the growth, for example, might come from the top or it might come from the bottom, with very different impact on the life of the poor. And of course, we don't even know what causes growth in the first place. Similarly, with aid, if you look at Africa, there was more and more aid over the years, and more and more poverty, and the poverty impact were very limited, you might think, from just looking at the graph. But of course, so many things happen. So maybe it would have been much better without the aid. Maybe it would have been much worse without the aid. We just have no idea. There's only one world. So the departure point is that, look, that's not these big questions. You're not going to get good answers to them. So let's do something different, potentially maybe prima facie less ambitious, but in fact more useful, which is to say, let's unpack the problem. Let's say, for example, education is important, right? Everybody agrees education is important, but then what next? Like, what are you going to tell, for example, a developing country government about the best way to organize their education system? Then it becomes more precise. Do you need more teachers? Do you need a different curriculum? Do you need computers? Do you need textbooks? So suddenly you find yourself with like thousands of possible suggestions for how to improve learning in schools. And there, we can have intuitions, but often these intuitions are not that good, in the sense that often when things are tried in practice, they don't work exactly the way you planned. So our idea is like, look, let's treat any of these suggestions. Once we have precise suggestions, we can think of them in the very same way that you think about a vaccine for COVID, which is, we have this great idea about, using a viral vector or using IRM messaging. Well, before we launch it, we try it out. So we take a sample, take the COVID vaccine trials. You take a sample of about 50,000 people. You give your candidate vaccine to half of them, randomly selected, and to the other half you don't. And then you wait over time and you see whether they get infected with COVID, whether they get very sick, whether they get hospitalized, and whether they die. And because nothing is different in the two groups, except that some got the vaccine and some didn't, at the end of the day, you can really say with a lot of confidence that the vaccine was effective. And it is those trials for the vaccine that gave us like the huge gift of being able to combat the epidemic, at least in the rich countries. Now, why not apply the same type of idea to social programs? So you take the education and say, well, my idea is that we need to abandon a curriculum that is too rigid, and we need to meet every child at their current level of instruction. It's not my idea, it's the idea of an organization that we met many years ago called Pratham. That was my first randomized control trial. We said, great, let's do that. So we went in 2 cities, Bombay and Baroda, took a few hundred schools. And in half of those schools, they implemented their program, which was basically a tailored education, remedial education program for the grade 3 students. And in half of the school, they implemented the same program for the grade 4 students. So now we can compare the grade 3 students where the program is in place in grade 3 to the grade 3 students where the program is in place in grade 4. And if we find the students who benefited from the program to do better, then we know that it's because of the program, because nothing else was different, and vice versa with grade 4. So we did that, and we found, in this particular instance, we found the program to be effective. We found that after 1 year, the kids who benefited from the program through this chance did much better. So we could replicate this experiment in different contexts, different places, figured out that, in fact, that result was very solid. And thanks to that, Pratham was able to scale it up. They are now working with millions and millions of children in India. And today, this program has now moved from India to Africa, where it's being implemented again in about 20 countries with various governments reaching millions of children. So that's an example of going from the proof of concept to the evaluation to the scale up of a particular intervention.
That's great. And of course, your book is full of really interesting examples, your first book, of cases in particular where this approach has been taken, mosquito nets, anti-malarials, nutrition. It's very, very striking, the range of different contexts. Presumably, there must be circumstances in which it doesn't work. I mean, in a scientific spirit, you get a nil result or even possibly counterproductive.
Yes, that's why I could tell you with a lot of confidence that often our intuitions are not as good as we thought, because having been involved in many, many randomized control trials and being part of a movement which has been involved in many, in our lab, JPAL, we now have about 500 researchers that are affiliated with our movement. And together they have completed, over 1,000 studies. And of these 1,000 studies, I would say at least half give disappointing results. That's not a scientific number. I haven't actually calculated, but more often than not, things don't work as well as you hoped. But the point is that that's also informative, because if you find that something doesn't work the way you hope, then that is giving you grounds, for example, to not scale it up or to scale it down or to maybe reorient it. I'll give you one very prominent example, which is several years ago, we started evaluating microcredit, which at the time was one of the most successful social innovation in terms of the number of people it has reached.
This is the Grameen Bank and all the
Grameen Bank model.
So the idea about that, everyone was talking about that. Yeah.
And of course, Professor Yunus got the Nobel Prize, Nobel Peace Prize for basically the promoting microfinance and disseminating it. But there had not been an evaluation of its impact. So we didn't know. There was a lot of hope that it would be extremely effective at alleviating poverty. It was very successful in terms of being popular and reaching a lot of people, but there was no evaluation. And then about a half dozen evaluations around the world started springing up from different research projects. And what was really striking is that in none of these evaluations, the researchers found any difference, really, between the treatment group that was exposed to microfinance and the control group. So that was a huge surprise to the researchers. And I think if you had only one study, you would not believe it. You would say, well, maybe the study was wrong or something. But when you have half a dozen together, that really changed the conversation. And at the beginning, the microfinance organization were, of course, very disappointed, and they resisted a little bit the news. But then what happened is that also prompted a rethinking of how they should think about their mission and how they should organize their mission. So it becomes projective. In sense, we are not saying that the fundamental problem that microfinance is trying to address, which is the poor don't have access to credit, is still there. The question is, how do we design a solution that is actually effective?
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.